I'm about to run you through the most underrated fighter in every single division in the UFC right now. Now, these could be guys who people just haven't taken note of yet or haven't been paying enough attention to, or they could be guys who people say are washed when they truly aren't, or they could be underrated for any other reason. I'm going to start off in the heavyweight division. The most underrated guy at 265 right now is Sergey Pavlovich. Now, I know what people are going to say. Did you not just see Tom Aspinall KO Sergey cold? And yes, I did see that, but what people don't realize is that was a fight between two ginormous heavyweights with unreal amounts of power. Somebody was going to get knocked out cold early. And the guy who happened to get knocked out on that night was Sergey Pavlovich, but I think people need to understand that I think 4 or 5 times out of 10, Sergey Pavlovich is the one knocking out Tom Aspinall. I encourage you to go rewatch that fight because 30 seconds in, Sergey Pavlovich had Tom Aspinall hurt bad. And unfortunately, Sergey did not pounce on the opportunity. Credit to Tom Aspinall for playing it off well. And then 30 seconds later, Tom Aspinall has Sergey on the floor. He's the new champion. I think a lot of people now just see Tom Aspinall as so clear of Sergey Pavlovich, and I don't see it the same way. I think that was a toss-up fight, 50-50 kind of fight, and that night was the 50% for Tom Aspinall, and the next night could easily be the 50% for Sergey Pavlovich. With the exception of Francis Ngannou and maybe Derek Lewis, Sergey Pavlovich has the most power I have ever seen at 265, and it is going to allow him to become a champion in the future. Sergey is only 31 years old. He's the same age as Tom Aspinall, and once John Jones is gone, this belt is going to be up for anyone, and I'm very confident that Sergey Pavlovich will get the rematch with Tom Aspinall one day. So the reason why I say he's underrated is I think a lot of people have just cast him aside and thought, oh, he's never going to be the champion, when I think he will become the champion one day. Next up, we have light heavyweight, and the most underrated guy at light heavyweight right now is another guy coming off a brutal KO loss, and that is Alexander Rakic. Now, once again, yes, I know Yuri just took him out, huge KO, but let's not ignore the fact that Alexander Rakic was completely outclassing Yuri Prochazka before he got hurt. And not only that, he was coming off a 2-year layoff from a nasty leg injury. Any guy who comes back from a 2-year layoff and decides to fight Yuri Prochazka is a madman. Now, Alexander Rakic is only 32, and with Alex Pereira getting up there in age, I think we're going to see an eventual title fight between Yuri Prochazka and Alexander Rakic as a rematch for the belt. Now, 205 is one of the weaker divisions in the UFC, so I think these two veterans are going to have a stranglehold over the division, and I think both Rakic and Prochazka will beat Jamal Hill. Alexander Rakic is one of the most clean, technical, and precise strikers we have ever seen at 205, and that kind of fighting will allow him to fight for the belt once again, and I think he may be able to be the champion one day. Now, for middleweight, I already know people are not going to like my answer, and a lot of people are going to click off of this video, but I have to be honest here. People need to understand that when the whole world is calling you overrated, you are no longer overrated, and you could eventually even become underrated. And that is exactly the case for the most underrated middleweight fighter right now, Khamzat Chimaev. Now, I know what people are going to say. He got fraud checked versus Burns, he missed weight, then he got fraud checked versus Usman. How could you ever say this guy is underrated? But want to know what I don't get? I have never seen a fighter in my life catch more flack for beating a top 10 fighter of all time like Kamaru Usman. He also fought the worst stylistic matchup for him in the entire welterweight division in Gilbert Burns and also beat him, and yet he still gets criticized like he got a KO loss from it. You can hate what he says on Twitter about how he's always calling out people, and you could just not like his personality, but the reality is when he gets into the cage, he wins fights. It gets the job done every single time. And one of the main reasons why I say he's underrated is because everybody is saying he is going to get destroyed by Robert Whittaker and he'll never become the champion at 185. And I just disagree. I think he's going to beat Robert Whittaker, and I think he's going to get the 185 belt. And if he could ever make 170 as well, he'll also get that belt. The hype train for Khamzat Chimaev for the general public has definitely slowed down, but not for me. I am still at an all-time high with him. I think he has a real opportunity to become a top 20 fighter of all time. And I think it is inevitable that he will become a champion at either 185 or 170, or maybe even both. So before you disagree with me so heavily, just ask yourself the question, if everybody is calling somebody overrated, are they really overrated, or do they become underrated? Now, 170 is a tough one. I think most guys at welterweight are pretty properly rated right now, but if I had to choose one guy for the most underrated, I'm going with Michael Venom Page. This is a guy who came in from Bellator, and you know what everybody was saying. He's come from Bellator. He didn't fight anyone real. He's going to get destroyed by these top-tier UFC guys. So that's the reason that he came in against Kevin Holland, and most people were picking Kevin Holland to beat him, and I think that was ridiculous. The power and unbelievable skill that Michael Venom Page showed in Bellator will translate to any organization in the entire world, and people need to realize that he could compete with the top guys in the world on the feet no matter what. It's just a matter if he could keep the fight standing. I'm not predicting that he's going to be the welterweight champion or anything, but I think it's very likely that if he gets the right matchups, he's going to creep into the top 5 and maybe get a title shot at 170. Now, at lightweight, I'm going to pick another guy coming off a KO loss. I don't know, I guess I just have sympathy for some of these guys, but the most underrated fighter at 155 right now is Jalen Turner. Now, he's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. He had a really rough going, but let's get the Moicano fight off the bat. He was going to win that fight. He just heard about the $300,000 bonus. He wanted to go for the walk-off KO, and it came back to bite him because the next round he got submitted. But let's be real, if he pounced on him right away, he was going to win that fight. Then the fight before that, he KO'd Bobby Green in one of the most malicious late stoppages I've ever seen. And then the 2 fights before that, he lost split decisions back-to-back against Dan Hooker and Mateusz Gamrot. That's just unfortunate. Now, Jalen Turner is 6'3", he's super lanky for the division, and he could strike with anyone at 155. I truly believe if it were just striking, he might even be a top 5 guy in the division. But where he really struggles, the one attribute he needs to work on is takedown defense. If he could get his takedown defense to just mediocre, I'm pretty confident that one day he will be in the top 5 at lightweight. He's not going to be a champion, but he's only 28 years old. He still has a lot of development he could go through. And now we move on to featherweight, and this is another one that I know a lot of people are not going to like, but the most underrated fighter at featherweight is none other than the champion Ilia Topuria. People are going to say, he's the champion, how could he possibly be underrated? But the reason why I say that is for 2 reasons. 1, because everybody is saying Max Holloway is going to destroy him. And 2, because people just like to diminish his Alexander Volkanovski KO win. Now, you can check out my last video where I explain why I think Ilia Topuria is going to beat Max Holloway. I think he's better on the feet, and if he's not better on the feet, he's definitely better on the ground, so he's going to find some way to win that fight. And the other thing is something that people just like to ignore is his win against Alexander Volkanovski is one of the better wins we've seen in the UFC. Alexander Volkanovski is arguably a top 5 fighter of all time, and if he's not top 5, he's definitely top 10, and Ilia Topuria made him lose by KO when he had never lost at featherweight in his entire UFC career. But the thing that makes Ilia Topuria so underrated is the fact that he is KOing these guys on the feet and putting on absolute clinics in the stand-up is he's not even a striker. He is a grappler at heart. He has more submissions than he has knockouts. This guy's a grappler, and he is knocking out the best strikers in the world. I truly believe that if Ilia Topuria does manage to defeat Max Holloway, he is going to be a very long-standing champion. I think he will hold the belt longer than anyone else who is currently holding a belt in the UFC. And for those reasons, I think he is underrated because I think almost no one expects that out of him. Now, bantamweight, the most underrated fighter is my king, Petr Yan. Petr Yan, in my opinion, is the most unlucky fighter in the history of the UFC, and for that reason, a lot of people just tossed him away saying his career was over. But what people don't realize is he may get that belt back. Petr Yan is only 31 years old, and in my opinion, he beat the current champion, he beat the former champion, and as long as he could avoid the machine Merab Dvalishvili, I think he has a real good shot at becoming the champion once again. Whether it's been robberies from the judges or unfortunate DQs, he has just been on the wrong side of unlucky events over and over and over. And I think it's time for the tide to finally change for him, and things are going to start falling for him, and I think he's going to get another title shot. Flyweight's another tough one, but I think the most underrated fighter at 125 is probably Brandon Royval. The current champion, Alex Pantoja, is an absolute nightmare matchup for Brandon Royval, and I don't see Royval ever beating him unless Royval makes huge strides in his takedown defense and grappling. But other than Alex Pantoja, I think Brandon Royval has shown he's a clear second best guy in the division, and he beats everyone else, including Brandon Moreno, which he just did. So that does it. That's every single division and the most underrated fighter in it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching.